with the scent of potpourri, the films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including written reviews, full episode show notes, and a complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. This week on the Patreon, I have been continuing my Flanagan Fridays series. I am up to, this coming Friday, when you're listening to this, will be episode 3 of The Haunting of Hill House. I'll have a full recap of that. And then the next day, on Saturday, I am continuing my Sci-Fi Saturdays series, where I am reviewing Foundation right now, season 2. I'll have episode 3 of season 2 up on Saturday. And then also I did another Patreon Potpourri episode, which is a full-length episode exclusive to Patreon members. This week's episode, or last week, was post-apocalyptic sci-fi on the Criterion channel. So I reviewed The Day the Earth Caught Fire, Panic in Year Zero, Testament, and The Quiet Earth. So that is on Patreon. Once again, you can sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for all that and a bunch more content. I'm your host, Matt Hurd, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd, at Obsessive Viewer. And in our featured review tonight, we'll be reviewing the latest Blumhouse horror movie, Night Swim, which opened in theaters on January 5th. And for this week's secondary review, we'll be reviewing Jake Johnson's directorial debut, Reliance, which is currently streaming on Hulu. And joining me tonight to do that is my friend and IFJ colleague, Sam Watermeier, who can be followed on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/SamMovieMan, and you can also find his work on MidwestFilmJournal.com. Welcome back to the show, Sam. How have you been, and how has your 2024 started out?
I'm a lot better now that I'm on the show.
Nice.
No, seriously, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on again.
Of course.
It's funny. I feel like I've been more enthusiastic in past episodes. With this episode, I feel like we have one disappointing movie, and for me at least, one movie that's okay.
Yeah.
I won't reveal which is which, but
right.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty enthusiastic, but I might be a bit of a downer.
Yeah, it's so funny because the episode that's a disappointment, or the movie that's a disappointment, not the episode that's a disappointment. Please God, don't let this episode be a disappointment.
Remains to be seen.
Exactly. But the movie that's a disappointment, it's funny because I had this mapped out for weeks, and I knew that you were excited about the movie. I was excited about the movie, and we're going to talk about it here in a bit, but it's not the best. But it is in my top 5 for 2024 movies right now. Which
oh wow,
have to get in that joke. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But I do have a couple of news items to bring up, just a couple quick ones that came up earlier this month. The one that I'm not surprised about, but I am something about, is that David Gordon Green is no longer directing The Exorcist Deceiver, the sequel in the planned Exorcist trilogy from Universal and Blumhouse, and they are currently searching for a new director. Sam, did you see The Exorcist Believer?
I did.
Okay.
I thought it was fine. To me, it was like Exorcist cosplay. It didn't really come close to the magic of the original. Not that I really expected it to, but David Gordon Green did such interesting things with his Halloween trilogy.
Yeah.
But then again, that trilogy started out on kind of a lower note.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, maybe this is just Believer is just him kind of warming up, and the trilogy will become more interesting from here. But the fact that he's not returning as director is a bad sign. And I also didn't think the idea of a trilogy was that great. I mean, I get the capitalistic reasons behind it.
Right.
But I just thought, like, really? We're going to squeeze 3 movies out of this?
Yeah.
And I have to imagine that there was at least some kind of plan in place for all 3, but it sounds like Blumhouse was kind of waiting to see what would happen with the first one. And I don't remember, did it do well box office wise?
I don't think it did. I know critically it was not. It was pretty much panned overall, and it's not a good movie. I really didn't like it. I reviewed it on the show with our friend Brent, and we both were not very high on this movie. And it's funny because from what I understand, like, Universal paid a buttload for the rights. Like, so the idea to make a trilogy was more of a, like, we need to recoup what we spent to get just the rights to make this damn thing. And my big takeaway from the first movie was that it felt more like it was an assignment for David Gordon Green than it was anything he had a passion for. Like the first installment of his Halloween trilogy, it is filled with a lot of really interesting Easter eggs and a lot of interesting connections from what I remember. And there is that, like, that love for the franchise that it has, like, there, that kind of goes through, like, it's clearly made. The Halloween trilogy was clearly made by people who appreciated the franchise and the weight of it. And this, I don't know if Exorcist was a case of them just not having a passion for the material, or if The Exorcist as a franchise just isn't as, big nowadays as it was when it first came out. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just like I said before, it's a strange movie to try to squeeze a trilogy out of. I would have preferred to see David Gordon Green maybe reboot the Nightmare on Elm Street series, because there's so much you can do with the dream world. I mean, the possibilities are, literally endless. And I just think The Exorcist, like, there's just not as much fodder there. And I feel like possession horror is no longer really surprising. Like, demons all kind of have the same voice, the same characteristics. Like, we've seen countless knockoffs of The Exorcist, and I don't know, just it's not as surprising to see that recreated yet again.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the inherent problem with The Exorcist. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry to hear that it's losing him as a director. I say that in a somber way, as if I really give much of a shit.
Right.
No, but I mean, honestly, I am a huge horror fan, and I would have loved to have seen, I don't know. It remains to be seen. Maybe the second one, they'll bring on an interesting director. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be interesting if they could find a way to salvage it, because either way they're going to make the other 2 movies. I just don't know what it's going to look like or who's going to be at the helm. And especially given just the way that the first movie is just so lackluster, in my opinion, it'll take a lot for it to recapture my attention. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. Kind of on a similar note, like kind of a completely different news story that has me much more excited than anything is like a couple of weeks ago, by the time people are listening to this, the news broke that there is a 28 Days Later sequel in the works, with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland returning, with the expectation to hopefully launch a new trilogy of films starting with 28 Years Later. Now, Sam, 28 Days Later is one of my all-time favorite movies. Like, that is a movie that I remember. I saw it in the theater when I was in high school, and I was nervous about it because I wasn't really that. I was nervous that it would be like too like gory, and it's not. But I was nervous about that, and then I remember like coming home after seeing it in the theater and like going on the IMDb message boards and reading like Ebert's review of it and like thinking like, oh my God, this is, yeah, I agree with this. And this poster's trash. This IMDb message board poster's trash. It's like, I love 28 Days Later, and I'm an apologist for the, or a supporter of the sequel 28 Weeks Later. But, I'm very ecstatic that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are going to reteam for 28 Years Later. How about you? What do you feel? How do you feel about this news?
Oh, I'm stoked too.
Nice.
I think 28 Days Later is one of the greatest horror films ever made.
Nice.
I mean, it really kind of revitalized the zombie genre to me, and made it exciting again. You know, of course, everyone credits it with kind of inventing fast zombies.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, just the kind of grainy digital handheld style is really cool. And that was still kind of new at the time. And yeah, I can't wait for this next one. I do think we need to maybe calm down a little bit with trilogies.
I totally get that. Yeah.
Like, I've heard there's a Strangers trilogy in the works, and it's like, let's see if the first movie works.
And see, like that. Oh, okay. Yeah, the Strangers trilogy is going to be interesting because, from what I understand, all three of them were shot back to back. They're all coming out this year. That's my understanding, at least. And that is intriguing, mostly because they did the same thing, like Netflix did the same thing with Fear Street, a few years ago, and I really liked that. But yeah, the whole idea of, it'll be very interesting to see, and this is me just spitballing here, but it'll be very interesting to see how the winds shift, whenever the Halloween TV show comes out, if it ever comes out, because I know that I can't remember who got the rights to it, but someone got the rights to Halloween to make with the intention of making a TV show out of it, which will be very interesting if that happens. But also there's I think Peacock maybe is working on Castle Lake, or Crystal Lake, Crystal Lake, set in the Friday the 13th universe. That's going to be a TV show. So I'm curious if we'll see like a shift where it's like, okay, maybe we don't do full like feature length trilogies. We just do TV series adaptations of like big name horror properties. But that all remains to be seen.
Well, it's something I'd like to talk about later with Self-Reliance is, I think we're kind of drifting into this trend of expanding stories when they don't really need to be, and I think that's due to maybe the popularity of streaming series. I mean, not that I have anything against streaming series, but I think with some movies it's preferable to just do a one and done remake. So I don't know. But having said that, I'm also interested in the idea of a Halloween series that explores Haddonfield. So I'm kind of a hypocrite But I don't know. It's funny. Like the past few things I've said, I've been like, I don't know, that might be bad. And then I eventually say, I don't know, it sounds pretty cool.
Just kind of talk yourself into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, the idea of a Halloween TV show, when the news broke, this was months ago, but when the news broke, I was trying to think, like, how could they possibly do that, or what would be the best way to do it? And like, I think I threw on the original Halloween, and I just kind of realized, like, they should do, like, not real time thing like 24, but do it like a limited series where the entire season takes place on Halloween, and it starts at the beginning, starts like during the day, and then gradually gets up to nighttime and the killings and everything. Not a direct remake of the story or anything like that, but something worthwhile enough to make it expansive enough to facilitate a full season of a show, or at least a limited run of episodes, but have it all take place over Halloween.
I think that's a great idea, or maybe just even the whole month of October.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Haddonfield is really rich territory for drama.
Oh yeah,
just given how haunted the town is and how scarred the residents are. I mean, there are a lot of things you could explore there. So
yeah,
I think it could be interesting.
Totally. And that's one of the reasons why I liked David Gordon Green's trilogy, is that it does put the focus on Haddonfield. And even if people didn't really care for some of that too much, I do like that the trilogy as a whole kind of explores like what the trauma of Michael Myers does to that entire community, which I thought it was explored pretty well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So those are the only two news items I have. Once again, just excited for the idea of 28 years later. Like, I'm so pumped for that. Like, I'm just so curious to see what that looks like whenever it happens. But Sam, we are here tonight to talk about a couple of movies. Are you ready to go into our first review of the evening?
I am.
All right, awesome. So first up in our featured review, we're going to be reviewing Night Swim, which is in theaters. It might not be in theaters by the time you guys are listening to this, but it is in theaters as of it was released in theaters January 5th. The premise, according to IMDb, is a family moves into a new home unaware that a dark secret from the house's past will unleash a malevolent force in the backyard pool. Director for the movie was Bryce McGuire. Writer was Bryce McGuire, with screenplay credits by Bryce McGuire and Rod Blackhurst, who they both wrote the short film, I believe. Yes. And the cast includes Wyatt Russell, Carrie Condon, Amelie Hoferle, and Gavin Warren. And of course, we're going to do a non-spoiler and then spoiler review. So we will separate it with a clip from the trailer later on. If you want to navigate timestamps, those navigate around the spoilers. The timestamps are in the show notes of the episode and at obsessiveviewer.com/OV412. So Sam, here we go. Non-spoiler review time for Night Swim. I remember you and I talking about how it looks really good. It looked really good. I don't know that I saw the short film, but like we were both pretty excited about this movie. So let's talk about it. I do want to give a quick plug. You did write a review for Midwest Film Journal. I'll have a link in the show notes. But Sam, why don't you go ahead and take it away with your non-spoiler thoughts on Night Swim, and let's hash out this movie.
So I was excited for this movie since the first teaser trailer, which was the best teaser I've seen in a long time.
The Marco Polo one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, it revolves around two teenagers in a pool playing Marco Polo, and one of the teenagers kind of vanishes during the game, and the other one, the girl, swims underwater to try to find him. and the pool kind of opens up into this abyss. And I just thought, oh my God, that is a childhood fear that I had.
Yes.
That, you know, the murkiness below me would just be endless, and pools were full of monsters. And I was just so stoked. I was like, this taps into such a relatable fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, when you're a kid in a pool, like anything is possible. Like you're worried that sharks could be around, as ridiculous as that sounds. So I was and the trailer really doesn't reveal much more than just the, you know, the darkness of the pool. And there's a cool shot of the surface kind of closing as if like she's swimming toward an entrance that is closing in on her.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, whoa, this looks so cool.
Yeah.
And it wasn't reliant on these sort of new boogeyman monsters that we've seen, like the Nun or Pennywise.
Mm-hmm.
Like the, you know, the trailer makes it very mysterious as to, you know, what the real threat is going to be.
Right.
It's just kind of the pool itself. And I was really stoked for that. And I'll just say the movie really didn't take advantage of the premise that in a pool anything is possible. I feel like it is very tame with the horrors that it explores. You know, I don't know if it was a budgetary reason or just kind of lack of creativity, but what the director, what was it, Bryce McGuire?
Yeah.
What he ultimately ends up exploring in the pool just isn't terribly scary or exciting. And okay, I'll just leave my initial thoughts there for you to jump in.
Sure. And it's not like, I agree completely. And it's such a bummer because that teaser trailer is so moody and so atmospheric, and it presents it has the idea of being a movie that's all about atmosphere and tension, but what the actual story we get is so kind of cookie cutter. It's very cliched. It is very much like a standard PG-13 studio horror movie that's pumped out with like an algorithmic look or an algorithmic sort of series of events in the script. And it's such a letdown because it could have been so much more interesting. I'm not even too upset about it being a PG-13 horror movie because they could have done a lot more with the PG-13 rating if they wanted to keep it at that. But there's just so much to it that is left unexplored and kind of half-baked that I like. So a big part of the story is the family moves in, and the father of the family is played by Wyatt Russell. He is a retired MLB baseball player who is dealing with multiple sclerosis diagnosis, and he is reckoning with like his nervous system and his body not being able to perform the way that it could. And it's very like that's one part where the story does a pretty good job of laying out like a pretty intriguing character base for that character. But then you enter into all of the horror elements of it, and it just doesn't do anything too interesting with it. So I don't know. I don't know. I will say that I had only seen the teaser, so I didn't see the full trailer. So like the moment that Wyatt Russell popped up, I was like, oh, I had no idea that he was in this movie. And I'm a fan of Wyatt Russell. I really like him. And I think that he's probably, for me, the best thing about this movie, but a lot of it just didn't work for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the major weaknesses, honestly, is him. And I don't think it's his performance. I think it's a matter of writing. His character never seems all that jazzed about the magical nature of the pool.
True.
I don't think this is too spoilery, but he cuts his hand while they're moving into the house, and after a swim one day, like literally just a day passes, his hand wound is miraculously gone, and we get the sense that it's from the pool. And he kind of becomes, well, you would think he would become obsessed with the pool's mystical qualities, but he really doesn't. And I was kind of expecting him to go full on like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters mode,
right,
and kind of alienate his family with his obsession over the pool. And his obsession just kind of like lingers on the surface and sort of never goes to extreme heights.
It's weirdly subtle. It's weirdly subtle. Yeah.
And in my review, I kind of blame that on this trend toward like elevated horror, where, everything has to be gritty and realistic and subtle, like you said. And it's like, why can't we have more fun with horror?
Yeah.
Like, to me, the premise taps into this kind of childlike sense of dark wonder with the idea of a pool kind of coming to life. And it's like, why aren't we having more fun with that?
Yeah.
It's the same issue I had with Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, it's very downbeat and moody. Yeah. And it's like, we have animatronic animals at our disposal. Why aren't we having fun with them?
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's a place for elevated horror, but it's not in Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's not in this movie either.
Right. And like, it's funny because I feel like the movie has this kind of crisis of identity in itself, because we have like these little moments of like trying to imitate elevated horror with having it be kind of self-serious with his healing journey, and with some of the, like, I get a little bit of like the jealousy with the son and his like his little league teammate, but they don't explore it enough. But then they also have like some extraordinarily silly surface level pool-centric dialogue. Like, there are a couple of scenes where it's like, I think Wyatt Russell at one point says like, the pool is the best thing that's ever happened to me or something. And like, I understand, like, it technically is, because we've seen it heal him, but also that's all we've seen of it. Like, we haven't seen him react to the fact that it's healing him or that it's having this effect on him outside of that one line, and it just comes across as so silly. And something that I really really kind of giggled at throughout the movie was that it seemed like they needed to make as much emphasis, or put as much emphasis on the pool as they could in the dialogue. So like this family just moved into this house, and the father's dealing with some health issues. The mother's dealing with, starting a new job, and the kids are in a new school. But it seems like most of the dialogue that they have, most of the conversations they have, revolve around the pool, which is one element of their entire life changing. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, go ahead and keep harping on the pool, but whatever. I don't know. I just thought that was it was silly in a movie that tried to be a little bit, it wasn't aware that it was being silly, as it was also trying to be serious. So,
yeah, that is funny. It's like the pool is one of the selling points of the house for them, but they do talk about it constantly.
Yeah.
And they're like constant, like they even take, I mean, they take night swims,
right?
Because they're so obsessed with it. And it's like, it's just a pool.
Yeah. Like that could have been completely handled. Like that could have been like, you wouldn't have had to change a single thing about the script or the movie if they had just added like a mist from the pool coming up into the house and going in, and like have it be like implying that like the pool has kind of not necessarily possessed them, but has influenced them to be so centralized on the pool. Like if they would have done like that, it would have been more interesting and more acceptable for them to keep talking about the damn pool.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it does rely too much on them being organically interested in it.
Yeah.
Just like naturally. Like, yeah, that would have been interesting if they were like possessed by it. To me, I was waiting for like a hard R Cocoon sort of deal.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this with our fellow friend and colleague Nick Rogers. It would have been cool if the pool kind of put the entire neighborhood in a trance.
Oh yeah.
I think there would have been a little more drama there. I mean, I know I'm committing like one of the cardinal sins of talking about the movie I wish it were rather than what it is, but like it could have been so much cooler.
Yeah. And what we do get is, in like, even with some aspects being pretty okay and pretty decent, the big set pieces of it, which we can maybe talk a little bit more in depth in spoilers, but some of the like set pieces, like even the one that we referenced earlier when talking about the teaser, like that, the visuals of like the surface of the water going like incredibly high up to where it's like you're at like a depth that's insane, like you're in an ocean. Like that disorienting state is really cool. It's very interesting. It's thrilling, but it's also like it is exactly visualized. It's exactly like the sunken place in Get Out. And it's like that. And then there's a whole sequence that is, it's the opening scene of it in a pool. And I'm like, you're not paying homage to these things. You're just repurposing something that is wildly popular and trying to get away with it because it's a pool. And I'm like, it just felt very, like you had mentioned, you didn't know if aspects of the movie were a result of poor script or lack of creativity. And I think it's mostly lack of creativity for the most part.
Yeah. And I will say that it does kind of successfully tap into some of the naturally creepy things about pools. Just a little bit. I mean, like that kind of gurgling noise that drains make, you know, I think it does a good job of emphasizing that. But like you would think that the more supernatural elements would just be scarier. I don't know why they didn't just really like let loose and go for it.
Same.
Yeah,
absolutely. And like the opening sequence, both the opening sequence and the sequence from the teaser. So the opening sequence involves a young girl being lured into the pool in the past, and the teaser is teenagers playing Marco Polo at night. Those are very effective set pieces. One thing that I wish it would have done a lot better is do any sort of development of the teenage characters. Like the guy in it he's in like 2 scenes. There's nothing to his character. He like, it's so weird. And that was another thing. That was the other thing that made me laugh, is that like completely unrelated to their house, to the pool, whatever, the like first person to interact with her at school is this guy with a flyer. It's like, hey, join our swim team. It's a Christian swim team. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, It's very weird, but I don't know. It doesn't even feel like it's a case of the movie being severely cut down in terms of editing. It just feels like there isn't a lot. It feels like they kind of backed themselves into a corner where they had a short film and they were like, let's expand it into a feature, but maybe weren't prepared to do that, which might be a little reductive or simplistic, but yeah, it didn't work for me.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about like the fact that we don't need to expand everything. Like,
right.
Maybe it is just a perfectly effective short film and that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
I think they, in, popular culture right now, there's this trend toward expanding everything. And, everything has to be part of like a multiverse or like have some spin-off show. And like, again, I get it for capitalistic reasons, but like, there has to be a compelling reason to explore these worlds further. And I do think that this had potential as a feature film though. It just, it's an oddly timid movie. Like it feels very tame and it doesn't really go for broke in terms of the horror elements. I mean, I know I've kind of repeated that again and again, but it's just frustrating.
It really is. And we'll talk about this in spoilers, but to kind of hint at it, the way that it ties itself together, or it does it does a thing that I feel like was very, very popular, and it's still kind of popular in horror, but was very popular, it seems, in like the early 2000s with like PG-13 or R-rated horror, like mainstream movies, where it's like, oh, it introduces this concept, and then part of it is that they have to figure out what the history is of it and figure out what caused it. And this feels like the most like rudimentary, just kind of not that involving or interesting setup for that. And when we get the like answers at like toward the end, it's like, fine. Like I don't like, it just feels very, very muted and not very interesting. To me, it did not hold my attention.
Yeah, that's interesting. You say, what you described in the early 2000s about movies revolving around a concept and the characters kind of having to piece it together. It reminds me of The Ring.
That's the exact one that I was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And like that movie actually is a really interesting mystery.
Oh yeah.
And you're really with Naomi Watts the whole time as she, tries to figure out what this tape is about and all the images on it. And it feels like this one kind of rushes through its mystery solving. Yes. And we eventually arrive at a character, and I'll talk about this later, but a character that's like kind of racist and like just very, I mean, it feels almost like a satire of something like The Ring.
Between that and all the like pool like dialogue, it kind of almost feels like it's a little bit close to being a parody movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, of course there's some like lore behind the pool and like it gets really goofy and yeah, I don't know. A movie that this has been compared to is Poltergeist, and I don't remember, but I don't feel like the lore behind the haunting in that was nearly as like convoluted.
No.
I feel like it was just kind of accepted as, a haunted house and something that actually occurs, scarily frequently. So, yeah, the mystery that's solved at the end of this movie just felt kind of goofy and
yeah, it was just kind of it was a very, it was, I don't want to say wet fart of a movie, but it was very much a not engaging horror movie. But do you want to go into spoilers? Because I want to talk about the pool party scene, and I kind of want to talk about it in a spoiler context. And then we can also talk about the ending, because Jesus.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the pool party scene.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. So before we go into spoilers, did you have any other non-spoiler thoughts, anything to throw out, or should we just go right into spoilers?
I think I've said my piece. I'm ready to I'm ready to go into spoilers.
All right, let's do it. So we're going to go into spoilers for Night Swim. If you want to skip the spoiler section and go to our second review of the night, check the show notes for timestamps. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, and then when we come back, we're going to be spoiling Night Swim.
You need to say something back. Ronan, Marco. Marco.
Okay, so spoilers on for Night Swim. I do want to talk really briefly in a more spoiler context about the teenagers, like the teenage, like her relationship with that guy. It is so underdeveloped in just such a nothing plot that it feels, that's one part of the movie where it feels like maybe they had written more around that, but just decided to abandon it entirely. Yeah, how did you feel about that part of the plot?
Yeah, it kind of bothered me that his sole characteristic is that he is maybe too forward with her and like kisses her when he maybe shouldn't have. Like, that's his whole character.
Yeah.
He's like the doofus who kissed her too soon.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, we could have done a little better than that, didn't we?
And like it's teased a little bit because like it's more of a punchline because it's like, well, he's Christian, that's bad for him to do that or something like that. And it's like,
right.
Like, and that's like we basically the entirety of his character in this movie boiled down to that. And I'm like, why even bother? It's just it's very lazy.
Yeah, and like he could have been maybe like a Nightmare on Elm Street-esque character in the sense of helping her through the horrors of the pool. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, like we could have explored that a little bit. I feel that way about a lot of elements of the movie. It's like they had this chance to expand the short film and just like came up really shallow, pun intended.
Nice. Yeah, they really did. And there was a moment in this movie, and we'll kind of use this to jump to the kind of whole pool party sequence, but the moment in the movie where Wyatt Russell is at his kid's baseball practice, and he, like, the coach / the father of one of the kids is like, why don't you try to hit one or what have you? And then he does, and the movie changes into like a dramatic baseball redemption movie.
Pool of Dreams.
Yes, nice. I love it. But it changes into that, and like for that moment, I'm so like disengaged with most of it. I'm just like, yeah, I'd watch this movie. Like, I really like Wyatt Russell. I think that this is an intriguing setup and everything. I would watch this movie instead of the movie I'm watching now. Yeah, and it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really resonate from there, except to lead to the pool party. Yeah, do you want to talk about that sequence?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like his performance was just kind of too understated. I feel like when he, knocks one out of the park, he's just not that excited about it. It's like this seems to be his chance to resurrect his career, and it's just like his reaction is basically, oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't understand why that was so understated. And then in the pool party sequence, he gets kind of cocky, which seems to come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like strutting around and like trying to compete with like the other dude bro neighbors. And it just felt like, in contrast to his more understated performance earlier on, it just felt kind of jarring and not natural.
Yeah, it felt like the movie was missing like one scene in between like the baseball scene and the pool party scene to really sell him on changing his kind of whole personality in the movie. But the actual pool party scene, I feel like, was such a missed opportunity. Or it's kind of a I don't know. I was trying to think of a pool punt, like a half inflated pool toy. Because because it has like an interesting element to where he wants to prove himself that he's like, or to test / prove himself that he is better and able to like go to toe in like the chicken fight thing in the pool with the kid and with the guy and the other kid. And that's really intriguing because the way it works out is that he is being pulled in by the entities and everything, which is, easily confused with his MS coming back and his ailments kind of acting up, which that could have been such an interesting thread to explore more fully, with him trying to figure out like what's going on and why it happened, or convince others of what happened. And then meanwhile, in that same sequence, we have his son videotaping the pool party and watching as he's like jealous of his father, like bonding with another kid. And then the movie does nothing with that. Like, that feels like such a weird, like, anomaly in the movie because it doesn't have any bearing on anything really going on. And it's really annoying.
You bring up something really interesting that I hadn't considered before. The suggestion that his attack in the pool is so close to his episodes with MS that no one really knows what's going on. Like, that would have been great if there were a few scenes of that.
Yes.
Like him at the bottom of the pool and like this keeps happening and his wife just dismisses it as, a symptom of his MS, but it's actually him being attacked. Like, that would have been great. But in this case, it's the first instance that we see him attacked by the pool. So it feels like such a letdown because it's during this party where when you see all these people in the pool, you should think, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like,
it should have a Jaws effect.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I was talking about this with someone on Letterboxd and they had some great ideas of what that sequence could have been. And it's like, let's see someone get strangled by a pool noodle or like, let's see the pool flood the entire neighborhood, or like, let's have creatures coming out of the drains. Like, if it's going to be Spielbergian, like, let's have some Spielberg spectacles. And it's just Wyatt Russell at the bottom of the pool. Like, that's not scary or exciting.
Right. Yeah, it's really completely undercooked. But like, even with that, like the end of that sequence, like the kid and his dad, like they're like, never speak to me or my son again. And then they leave. And like, it also, like, that feels like it could have been explored more as well, or anything else could have been done. And then instead we get like, okay, the family's isolated, they're alone, the father becomes possessed, and we get this dual narrative thing at the climax where like the mother is saving the son and the father is possessed and going after the daughter, and then it's like the most like ham-fisted ending with him being like him basically sacrificing himself, and I'm just like it seems like they didn't work hard enough to map out how they wanted to actually tell a story, if they even had like a story worth telling in the full-length version, and it's just such a downer.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a case of Jason Blum like seeing the short film and maybe approaching those filmmakers and trying to get it expanded into a feature, and they just didn't have the chops. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention real quick because I didn't spoil it entirely earlier, but in the end, the lore behind the pool is explained by this like stereotypically mystical Asian character.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, come on.
It's
like,
very cringy.
Yeah, like it's like, well, now this really feels like an 80s Spielberg movie.
Yes.
Like it felt very like dated and kind of cringy, with her like explaining this like centuries old myth in this like thick Asian accent. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And like, even in addition to that, the weird unexplained properties of the water in that scene, and how it's like, I think it was like turning black, and it was weird. It just didn't make sense to me. And I don't know, it could have been a lot better. But yeah, like as soon as we get like the backstory of the family from the 90s, and it just felt like the most lifeless explanation for what's going on, especially because it comes so late in the movie and isn't properly built toward. Like the mother, Carrie Condon, finds out about the past family, and then does some Googling, and then goes to this place, and like it's contending with so many different like half thought out subplots involving like the kids and Wyatt Russell and the community for like a brief second at the pool party, but everything else just feels so like there's nothing that's really wrapping it all together, and it just feels very dumb, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like, I don't know about you, but when the explanation came, I just felt like I don't need that.
No.
Like in Poltergeist, some houses are just haunted.
Yeah.
Like, why can't just some pools be haunted?
Right.
Like that's all we need. The water doesn't need to have rules.
Yeah. Like yeah. And like that also reminds me of something I didn't mention in non-spoilers, but the pool guy giving that whole explanation about how like, oh, it's tapped into the spring water and into a natural spring and everything, and I'm like, that is interesting enough, that's fine, but then he's like, yeah, people love their pools are magical things, and I'm like, what the, like, why? Like, this is such a non sequitur in this conversation, and it just feels like, I don't know. It felt like they were like, well, this is a pool movie. We need to make sure that we reference pools every single scene. Yeah, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yep. And then the last thing before we can kind of wind down this review is that there's a cat in the movie that doesn't fare well, I don't think. I think it's basically killed off.
For like no reason.
Yeah, no reason whatsoever. It's just, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, as a cat lover, that bothered me, because
Me
I was
too.
like, if you're gonna kill off the cat, like at least make its death like creative.
Yeah, if you're gonna rip off one Stephen King aspect with it, why not do the whole Pet Cemetery thing too, and throw the cat in the pool and then have it be reanimated? Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of cats, pizza is coming up. But
Aw.
yeah. So yeah, any final thoughts on Night Swim? And if not, what did you end up rating it on Letterboxd?
I gave this one 2 stars. I'm usually pretty generous with star ratings, but yeah, just really disappointed in this one. I think it was actually the first January release that I saw.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just really disappointing. It's funny, by the time this episode goes up, I don't know if it'll even be in theaters, but
yeah, I was thinking that too.
But yeah, it was a bummer.
Yeah, it really was. I rated it 2 stars as well. I think for a brief moment I was considering doing 2.5, but I couldn't reconcile myself with that. I couldn't justify it. So I ended up rating it 2 stars. Once again, for our listeners, Sam wrote a review on Midwest Film Journal. Check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, that's it for our review of Night Swim. Sam, are you ready for the secondary review of the evening, Self-Reliance?
Yes, and I will say this movie is better than Night Swim.
Yes, it is. Self-Reliance is the directorial debut of actor Jake Johnson, who's obviously known for New Girl and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. The premise of Self-Reliance is when a man is offered $1 million to play a game in which hunters try to kill him, he thinks he has found the perfect loophole. They can only attack when he's alone. His only problem is that none of his friends or family believe the game is real. The cast includes Jake Johnson, Anna Kendrick, Biff Whiff, Mary Holland, Emily Hampshire, and Andy Samberg. And I figure we'll probably go ahead and just do a non-spoiler review, and then if need be, we'll do a quick spoiler review at the end. But Sam, how did you feel about Self-Reliance?
I thought it was a pretty impressive directorial debut for Jake Johnson. Before watching it, I didn't know that he wrote it as well. And I did a little research, and he had actually planned it as a series, and he had like 3 seasons mapped out. I will say I'm glad he didn't go that route, because I felt the movie didn't have a whole lot of meat on its bones.
Right.
I thought, so the premise is, kind of sets his character up for some possible danger. And I liked it. I liked the movie. I did feel like it was a little too breezy for it to really succeed as somewhat of a thriller, because I was never, the stakes didn't feel as high as they were presented to be because of its breeziness. And I don't know. I think Jake Johnson ultimately carries it, though, just with his charm. I thought it was okay. I also feel like I've seen this sort of thing before. With the game, and even other comedic versions. Like, have you seen the movie The Man Who Knew Too Little?
I haven't. No.
Probably not the best example, because it's kind of a lousy movie with Bill Murray, but he's in kind of like a role-playing scenario.
Okay.
And I didn't think that this take on it was like that much fresher than kind of what I've seen before. But overall, I thought it was charming. What did you think?
Yeah, that's kind of where I came down on it too. I did think it was pretty charming overall, and I think Jake Johnson clearly knows what he works best in, and by that I mean he has this kind of this kind of not necessarily slacker sort of persona, but something kind of adjacent to that. And I think it works really well in this movie because he has this kind of laid back kind of nature to himself. But once the game like starts, and once everything kind of starts going into a more intense avenue, the kind of biggest strength that the movie has is that it explores his character as being someone who is trying to convince others of what's going on, but failing to convince them, but being kind of a mix between, not a mix between the straight man and a hectic person, but basically his family, who should be taking him seriously and his heightened state of suspense or fear. They are just kind of like, nope, that's just him. And then I don't know, he has this kind of casualness to the immediacy of the situation that he's in. So like he'll like throw out a quick line about how like, okay, well I'm in a life or death situation and you guys are fucking with me. So like I don't know what to do. But he'll do it in such a way that it's like he has that laid back persona thing kind of locked down in him. I don't know if I'm communicating it well enough, but basically I just think that it's an interesting balance for him to have like this crazy situation in which he is the only one who is aware of what's going on, but he's failing so miserably at convincing others of it. I don't know. He doesn't expend a lot of energy trying to convince them of it. It's just like, they're not going to believe it. So fuck it. I'm just going to be panicked throughout everything. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I liked it.
I see what you're saying. Like his character could have easily been super neurotic and like nebbish and, freaking out. But he is kind of comically casual about it. And what's funny is that, like you said, that's why no one believes him, is because he explains it in this like such casual way, like as if they should just naturally accept it.
Yeah.
And the setup itself is kind of, it's like it sets itself up in a way to where it's so odd that you'd kind of have to believe it. Like Andy Samberg gets him into the game, and it's like, if it were truly ridiculous, there would have been a bigger celebrity than Andy Samberg involved. And it's like, that's, it's like, why would I make up that I met Andy Samberg?
Right.
So like, that's funny and everything, but I think that also plays into the movie's weakness, maybe. Like, maybe that's why I didn't feel as invested in it, because it has this like kind of casual distance that the character creates between people and maybe the audience itself. I don't know. I just felt like the movie itself was like a little too breezy. Like when the killers are hunting him, I thought there was an opportunity for some sequences that were, truly kind of surprisingly scary.
Yeah.
And it just never reached that level for me.
Same. They kind of underplayed the whole hunter aspect of it.
It's like, it's fine to have this, character who treats everything casually, but I think everything around him should have been a little more heightened.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. A big part of the movie is his connection with Anna Kendrick that forms, and the way that they kind of bond throughout the movie. I don't want to necessarily go into too many spoilers until we get to spoilers, but I did like the way that kind of relationship kind of grew throughout the movie. And I think it's paid off pretty well at the end. But I did like, I kind of wish that was a little bit more pivotal into things, because at one point things are just kind of dropped until like it resurfaces at the end. So I don't know, I just kind of felt like that was a little bit underdeveloped, but what was there I thought was pretty interesting, and kind of goes into kind of like an indie romantic drama sort of storyline for a moment, and I kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, I thought the kind of indie romantic dramedy elements worked really well.
Yeah.
I read that Jake Johnson pitched this movie as like Bottle Rocket by way of Jacob's Ladder, and I think that sounds much more interesting than what the movie is.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, like it could have used a little more Jacob's Ladder, like some sequences that were truly scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's an okay movie.
Yeah.
I was much more invested in it than I was in Night Swim.
Oh, me too.
I didn't find myself getting angry about it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
there's a win there.
Yeah, and I really liked seeing Biff Whiff in the movie. He is someone who, like, I and like the rest of the internet, I think has kind of fallen in love with him thanks to a couple of sketches in I Think You Should Leave. And it's nice to see him in a supporting role in like a feature film. And I thought he was really good throughout the movie.
Is he Detective Crashmore?
Yes.
Okay,
he's Santa Claus.
He's awesome.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, and his character is hilarious.
Oh, absolutely.
In this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts and non-spoilers, or do you want to jump into spoiler section?
Yeah, I think I'm ready for spoilers.
Okay, yeah, me too. I can't really think of anything to talk about in non-spoiler. So we're going to go ahead and go into spoilers for Self-Reliance. It is streaming on Hulu. If you don't want to be spoiled, check the show notes for timestamps, all of that. And if you have seen it, stay tuned, because I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, and when we come back, we're going to be spoiling Self-Reliance.
Hi.
Are you the actor Andy Samberg?
I am.
I'm a big fan, man.
Oh, thank you very much. Hey, I got a question for you. You want to get in? Thomas Walcott, single, no children, no dependents. Job is network management, physically fit. Guess they're not too strict about that one. I'm joking. Kind of serious, though.
You have been selected to partake in the biggest reality show in the dark web. There will be people trying to kill you, the hunters.
What are you talking about? There's people trying to murder me? Oh, shit. Very much so.
You will have 30 days to survive. You will only be killed when you are alone.
So let me get this straight. You cannot touch me if I'm with someone, and then I get $1 million.
All right, so spoilers on for Self-Reliance. Sam, we didn't really talk too much about the intricacies of the plot or the intricacies of the game, but I thought that it was pretty interesting that they have that caveat of like they can't kill you if you're unless you're alone, which makes sense even if it seems kind of arbitrary. But I do like that as a jumping off point to explore his kind of like not kind of, I guess, slacker lifestyle or lack of connection with other people, and him not moving on from his divorce also, or relationship dissolving. I can't remember if they were married. I think they were. Yeah. So yeah, how did you feel about that part of the game and the plot?
I thought that was interesting because, you know, he views it as an easy loophole when in actuality it kind of presents a terrifying situation for him as someone who was just recently broken up with and is alone. But he seems to be in denial about that. So, you know, that's an interesting conflict. And I think I know Jake Johnson also wrote it during COVID. So like the idea of isolation is there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, it's just kind of naturally funny to see him try to partner up with people.
Yeah.
Sometimes complete strangers. I mean, Biff Whiff plays just a homeless guy that he bumps into and makes his, bodyguard, so to speak. So yeah, I thought that was a premise that's definitely rich for comedy, which he, mines pretty well.
Yeah, and I like the way that he has these interactions with other characters, and the way that it kind of is a reflection of how he is toward other people. So like the idea of him being hunted is obviously creating this sense of immediacy that he needs to be with other people at all times. So like that creates a burden on other people for sure. But I feel like it's not necessarily presented as him having burned bridges or anything. It's just that he is asking way too much of people. And when we get like Biff Whiff in the picture and then Anna Kendrick in the picture as well, as being kind of partnering up with him to help him survive this, it kind of felt like it maybe lost a little bit of that reflection of how he treats people aspect. He does kind of grow from the experience, or grow from the inner, like the shared connection that he has with Anna Kendrick, and that's all well and good and great and everything. But I kind of feel like it lost a little bit of luster in terms of what it was trying to say about who he is as a person at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it's also kind of the way he acts with people when he partners up with them is presented as like him growing and changing, but he's actually just in the same rut that he was in before.
Yeah.
Like there's this scene where his longtime girlfriend, who he had been with since he was like 15 years old, she explains to him that she felt like they were kind of sleepwalking through life and just doing the same things, and they were just kind of attached for the sake of being attached, and it's trying to present his situation as the game as being different, but it's really kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of contradictory in sort of a weird way. I don't know about you, but I was also kind of bothered by the multiple instances of him resolving these long time conflicts with people with basically one conversation.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit weak, really. Yeah.
Yeah, like, the movie sets him up as having a really hard time confronting his ex-girlfriend. Like, he goes to her house every day, but he doesn't have the guts to knock on the door. And he finally knocks on the door, and it's like they have this, like lifetime worth of therapy in a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah. Which also kind of feels like, I think I appreciate that a little bit more than you do, because it does kind of, I don't know, it in itself kind of contradicts itself for him as a character, because he, up until that point in the movie, was saying like, I have no idea what happened. I have no idea what caused everything to unravel. I don't know why she left me. And then when they have the conversation, she's like, why? Like we had long conversations about this. Like, this is why. We were in a rut. Like, we were doing everything. You were content with everything. I wanted more. Like, going through all of it, and it's presenting it with the idea that like they've had exhaustive talks about this, yet he just kind of closed himself off to that, and created this kind of insulated or isolated thing around his emotions about it, to where it's like, well, yeah, I don't know, so I can't move on because I don't know what I was the cause of, or what I did to cause that. So I'm just gonna stay here, do my thing, and just be like in this completely depressing like singular existence that's completely routine, and just not think about it. So I don't know. I appreciated that a little bit more, and I think I kind of got a little bit higher opinion of it just talking it out just now. But but I did think that was okay. It was fine.
Yeah, I guess my issue is that like the relationship he forms with Anna Kendrick, I mean, by necessity, they have to just kind of, be together and not leave. But it wasn't that much different than his former relationship, I guess. And,
right.
They talk about, she says something about like, let's live each day like it's our last, but they just kind of stay hunkered down in a motel room. And I don't know, it would have been interesting to see them kind of say yes to everything and like take risks, and there would have been, some chance for some further comedy if they were adventurous like they seem to think they were. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of just falls into that same routine. And then I also thought that it was setting it up to like I was suspecting that either Anna Kendrick or Biff Wiff would have been like actually an assassin and like playing him and everything. And I think the movie kind of toys with that idea or teases it a little bit, but then I kind of liked the reveal of Anna Kendrick just being like, yeah, I'm just a lonely person. I didn't realize that it was real, but I figured I'd just, string you along and everything. And it's like, okay, yeah, that works. That's interesting character development. But then also like the end of the movie is predicated on like the last scene, the last shot of the movie is, it's a good callback because it's him at her door and then about to knock and then stopping and then knocking because he's now moved on from, his rut and everything. But it also is like, I kind of want to see them reckon with that, like that massive lie that she did, the manipulation and everything, which I guess we got a little bit of that, but I just kind of wanted more resolution to that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And like the cynical side of me sees that ending and thinks, well, he's kind of back where he started.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie opens with him, knocking on his former girlfriend's door, and who's to say that the knock at the end will lead to something happy.
Well,
but that's me being kind of overly cynical about it.
Sure. But also I think that because the beginning of it is him not knocking on the door and the ending is him actually knocking on the door. So I think that opens the door. You didn't
have to school me so hard. Like, there's no need to yell. Okay.
No yelling, I promise. But but yeah, there is that. But I wanted a little bit more closure out of that. And I also kind of felt like the whole father aspect was probably the weakest part for me. Because like it's referenced that his father left at an early age, and then suddenly like the proprietors of the game like brought his father, like Wayne Brady went and got his father and brought him to him in a limousine. I'm like, that felt like a little bit like it didn't fit within the greater movie. How'd you feel about Christopher Lloyd as the father?
Well, yeah, that goes back to what I was saying about like it's fine if his character treats everything casually, but I think the movie itself kind of treats everything casually. Like getting his father involved, like you said, is like kind of ridiculous if you think about it. But it's sort of the ridiculousness is kind of glossed over, and I don't know if that's what's supposed to make it funny. I mean, it's not really played for laughs.
No.
I mean, in terms of Christopher Lloyd, like he's always a treat to see when he pops up and stuff. And I mean, I think he does a lot with the little he has to work with.
Yeah.
That was another one, instance where I felt like their confrontation was a little, kind of half-hearted. It, like, you know, it could have been a more dramatic scene. You know, it basically just ends with him saying, "I love you, Dad," and like everything's fine, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe there's supposed to be the sense that like after going through this life or death situation, like he's able to let go of his resentment toward his father. Like,
yeah.
To me, it felt a little half-baked, and it just kind of felt like a big moment that just sort of fizzled out.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the Andy Samberg of it all. I thought that was a good bookend for the movie, especially since it's basically presented like, obviously he's playing himself, a version of himself, but I like that it's basically like this dark web game has not even like extorted him or blackmailed him into doing this. It's more like an extreme version of a Cameo that they bought, like Cameo the website. And I like that, but I think that I was hoping, or I wish that the movie would have done a little bit more with that, because there's Andy Samberg and then Wayne Brady is referenced and then pops up in the movie. But it was kind of disappointing that kind of, I don't know if I'd say meta aspect of it, but I don't know. Maybe it's also just me kind of wanting something different out of the movie than what it was entirely. But I think that I was under the impression that maybe Andy Samberg and maybe other celebrities would make have a bigger presence in the movie. But that obviously wasn't the case. But what we got of them was pretty good. And it also kind of feels a little bit interesting in terms of, at least in that first scene with Andy Samberg and Jake Johnson, where at the end of it, Jake Johnson's like, do you want to get a beer or something sometime? And he's like, no, just leave. Like, that's funny, but it's also, it feels like an interesting kind of reflection of Jake Johnson's character just not having a lot of connections with people, or having like a strong, I don't know, support system for his various idiosyncrasies. So I don't know. How'd you feel about it?
Well, in terms of the ending, like I don't know why there wasn't more of a reveal that the show was real. I mean, it ends still leaving you wondering whether any of that was legit. Like,
right.
He just is handed a briefcase in a warehouse, basically. I don't know. I like just a little taste of what the reality show would have been.
Yeah,
kind of would have. It felt necessary to me. Just, I mean, not a lot, but just like, you know, maybe just one little clip of him watching the show on his laptop or something.
Yeah, that would have been really good, because especially since the plot has a couple of turns where, like, the whole scene where they're told that it's the actual name of the show is like Delusions of Grandeur, and it's not like it's not a survival show. It's a show about just people that have inflated opinions of themselves, or like there was a whole thing. And then I don't know, it does leave it on kind of not necessarily ambiguous note, but it's just kind of like what was the point of it? Kind of as a more overall feel toward it. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, not that I expected this to be David Fincher's The Game by any means.
Right.
But it does have a very similar ending with, you know, everyone kind of showing up at the big reveal.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is that in The Game, to me, that's like one of the most emotional scenes in David Fincher's whole filmography. And
Nice.
I just think that ending pays off really well. And in this movie, it's like, it kind of ends with like such an awkward whimper. And, and I get that, you know, that's like part of the movie's sense of humor, but, yeah, And maybe it's commenting on the fact that, like, in reality, if there were a game-like scenario, the big reveal at the end would probably be kind of awkward and like a letdown.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. It goes to show, like, the fact that I'm not really sure what it's aiming for and whether it's successful. It's like, it felt a little half-baked to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, I think that overall it definitely feels like it's a strong outing for Jake Johnson as you know, a first-time director. I think that it shows a lot of promise. But I'm eager to see what he does next as a filmmaker. But I think that overall this movie, if it didn't have his name behind it, or it didn't have that distinction of being like his debut film or his directorial debut at least, I think it would be a little bit more forgettable than the kind of out there premise should have it be. But I think overall it was okay. Like I said, I rated it. Did I say what I rated it? I ended up rating it 3 stars. I thought it was solid.
Yeah, I'd probably go with 3 stars.
Nice.
I think that's a great point, that, like, if it weren't his directorial debut and it was just something he starred in,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would have given it quite as much consideration.
Yeah.
But you know, it is his first outing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say it's a better debut film than Night Swim.
Yeah. I totally agree. At the very least, Self-Reliance at least has like a pretty clear idea of what it wants to say or what it's saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like I've maybe been a little too dismissive of it. I think it has very, like, lovely ideas about, like, stepping outside of your comfort zone and like connecting with people and I think it's very well intentioned and heartfelt. It just didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't quite, blow me away, but I don't mean to sound too dismissive and cynical about it.
Right. Same here. It was definitely solid. I definitely liked it. So, I liked it well enough. I'll say that. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Self-Reliance, or should we kind of start winding down with the potpourri section?
I'm ready for some potpourri.
All right, sweet. So once again, we both rated it 3 stars on Letterboxd, I believe. And yeah, check that out on Letterboxd. My username is Obsessive Viewer, and of course, Sam's is Sam Movie Man. Link to all that in the show notes, of course. So that is our secondary review for the evening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of Self-Reliance and Night Swim. Of course, you can reach me on all the social medias or email me, matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or join Patreon and message me there. Patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. So with that, we're going to
plug, subtle.
Thank you. I am a seasoned professional. But with that, we're going to wind down the episode with the potpourri section of the show, which is the show in which we kind of talk about anything that we've watched lately, anything that we didn't cover in the show. It's the segment where what was the catchphrase for it? I'm not sure. Whatever we want, as long as it smells good. There we go. So for potpourri, I have one thing. Sam, do you want to get us kicked off with something that you've watched lately, or anything that you have on your mind for potpourri?
Yeah, sure. I just want to give for the Indiana listeners, I want to give a quick shout out to the Historic Art Craft Theater.
Nice.
I just saw a 35 millimeter print of Fargo there, and it was just magical. If you haven't been, I highly recommend going. And I mean, yes, it was a very scratchy print, but kind of charmingly so. I think it's cool to see, an old piece of film. It makes for a completely different viewing experience. So I would just highly recommend that theater to anyone who hasn't gone. It's in Franklin. I think the next movie coming up in February is Pretty in Pink.
Nice.
Just a really cool second run theater. I think it's like 100 years old. So yeah, I just wanted to give that theater a little shout out.
Absolutely. I love the Artcraft Theater so much. I believe here in a couple of weeks, yeah, you were right. Pretty in Pink is playing February 9th and 10th. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is playing the weekend of February 16th. Coming to America is going to be playing February 23rd and 24th. And I believe that here soon they're going to have their sponsorship party thing, where basically what I understand is that they have their schedule and they have like local businesses come and sponsor screenings. So that's when, like, sometime next month, I believe they will kind of unveil the full calendar of movies. But I love that place so much. I've seen several movies there, and I talk about this all the time on the podcast, but that movie theater is something so special. Like, it is such a special place. I've seen several of my like all-time favorite movies there, and like more recently I saw the original Scream, which was fantastic to see on the big screen for the first time, seeing it on the big screen. Which is awesome.
Was it an old print?
I don't think it was. I think it was a digital like Blu-ray transfer, but it was still really, like, even just stretched out, it kind of had like an antique quality to it. But it was awesome, because that is probably the movie I've seen the most times in my entire life. And it's just cool to think that, like, here 20 some odd years later, or I can't do math that quickly, but almost 20 years later, I finally got to see it on the big screen for the first time. So that was great. Obviously, one of my go-to anecdotes about the Artcraft Theater is that I got to see a 35 millimeter print of Seven Samurai a few years ago. Oh my God. It was like, that was like almost a religious experience for me. And like, it was amazing, because like Seven Samurai is my all-time favorite movie. It is the best movie I've ever seen. It's incredible. And like, getting to see it on the big screen with a packed house was so interesting to me, because I had seen it. I've seen it several times over several, like 15, 20 years probably, in different ways, in different, like, I would take my laptop to work when I worked as a security guard, worked overnight as a security guard, and watch it on my laptop. And like, to see it with a group of people, and to like hear people laughing at the funny parts, or being like affected at the emotional parts and everything. I'm like, this is cinema. It was just amazing. And I also got to see the original Godzilla as part of like a big, like 2-day like fest that they did for sci-fi horror monster movies. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I adore that theater so much. It is one of, if not my favorite place to see a movie in Indianapolis, or in the Indianapolis surrounding area, because it's in Franklin. But yeah, anyway, I'm glad you got to see Fargo there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I want to just add, you get a lot of bang for your buck there.
Mm-hmm.
The tickets are super cheap. They're like $6. And they don't just show the movie. They do like a raffle beforehand, and they show an old cartoon. For Fargo, two of the employees did like a little Fargo themed sketch beforehand.
Nice.
And they like spoke in Minnesota accents. Like, there's a lot more to it than just the the movie itself.
Yeah, it is not
whatever
like
they
a
showed.
multiplex experience. It is very clearly like a very community focused like experience, and it's just so warming. It's so like heartwarming to be there. I loved it. Oh, I also saw E.T. there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen nearly as many movies there as you have. I'm kind of catching up. But it is cool. Like I went to the bathroom at one point and I came back in, and just like everyone laughing at one of the iconic moments was just like you said, it was like really heartwarming.
Yeah.
It's like everyone laughs like a little harder there.
Yep.
And it does feel like more of a communal experience than your typical multiplex. So I agree, it's very special.
Absolutely. And I'll put a link in the show notes for people to find the Artcraft Theater, because it's fantastic. We love it here at the Obsessive Viewer. Okay. Anything else for Potpourri, or should I go to mine?
Go to yours, please.
Okay, so I kind of spoiled this to you earlier in the day on Facebook, but so what I've been doing is when I have like a guest, or like this is the first time I'm doing this specific thing, but I mentioned in a previous episode that basically what I'm doing with Potpourri this year, as I'm working on being more consistent, is that when I have time allocated to me to where I can watch something with the express purpose of bringing it up on Potpourri, I will do that. So since we're recording this a little bit ahead of time, I was able to finesse watching a movie. And I was trying to figure out what movie I would watch. So I decided to go to your Letterboxd account. And I went to the like films tab where it shows all the movies that you've logged and rated. And what I did was I sorted them by your highest rating. And then since I've been such a big fan of Criterion Channel recently, since I got a subscription to it, I decided to filter that by all the ones that are available on Criterion Channel and all the ones that are on like my personal watch list of Criterion Channel movies. So I decided to watch The Wages of Fear after going through that whole rigmarole. And this was a movie that I had not seen. It is phenomenal. It is absolutely incredible. The plot summary, for those who don't know, is something that I'm bringing up right now as I fill time. The plot summary, it's from 1953. It's in the South American jungle. Supplies of nitroglycerin are needed at a remote oil field. The oil company pays 4 men to deliver the supplies in 2 trucks. A tense rivalry develops between the 2 sets of drivers on the rough, remote roads where the slightest jolt can result in death. This movie blew me away as an anti-capitalist kind of movie. It's incredible. It is incredibly tense. Basically, it follows these 2 sets of 2 men with trucks of massive amounts of like jerry cans of nitroglycerin, and they have to go 300 miles for $2,000. So it's just like the level of tension that comes in just like the slow moving of these giant trucks, and the different obstacles that they come across, and just like that ticking time bomb throughout it is just so like pulse pounding and tense filled, but also just the fact that they're doing it so that they can like, I think, just so that they can like eke out a living or be able to get out of the town that they're in is remarkable. I don't know. I loved it. Sam, it's one of your higher rated movies on Letterboxd. How did you feel about The Wages of Fear?
Well, I'm thrilled that you watched and enjoyed it. Just hearing you read the plot synopsis, like, how badass does that sound?
Oh my God, so good.
And like, it really lives up to that. Like, it's, it's black and white. It's from the 50s, but it feels like a fucking like Michael Bay high concept action movie from the late 90s or 2000s.
Yes.
Like, it's really intense. Like, and not to like rag on, old movies by any means,
Right.
but I just, when I first saw it, like I didn't expect that level of intensity and action drama.
Same.
But yeah, it's a really cool movie. And also kind of heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if I remember correctly, the guys who are tasked with this, like, seemingly impossible mission are doing it for like a very meager amount of money.
Yeah. Like it's for $2,000, and I'm sure that back then it was a lot more than 2,000 in terms of, how much that money is now. But like just the idea, like there's a moment early on when not only like when the oil company is like, okay, well, we need this, we're only gonna hire 4 people, and so we need to prove that you guys know how to drive. And then when they get to where they're about to be taking assignments and everything, one guy's like, no, I knew someone who took a job like this, and when he came back, he was never the same. And no, there's no amount of money to make me do this, and he leaves. And it's like, just the fact that, like, there's a point early in the movie where the kind of main character, I guess, is Mario. He is talking to Joe, the other kind of who becomes his partner in the drive, and he's explaining like, yeah, I can't leave. There's no way. I think I might be confusing it with Sorcerer, which is the remake that William Friedkin, I think, did. But I don't know if it's necessarily explained in this movie, but it's like implied, or I think that there is a little bit of confusion on my part, that it's kind of like the people that are going for this job are not necessarily on the run, but don't have a natural way to get into like legitimate jobs.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's that scene where Mario is telling Joe, like, yeah, you can't, like, it costs this much to get a train ticket, or there's no trains coming out this way. So I need, like, he's basically explaining, like, he's literally stuck here. And as someone who has been working an office job for almost 8 years and feeling that corporate kind of complacency or stagnant nature of the corporate world, and also having much just like having grown into someone who just is very much not pleased with the late stage capitalism we're in. Like, this movie like resonated in such a profound way, and it's so funny that it's 70 years and it still resonates. It's amazing. It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the way it revolves around this ensemble of like salt of the earth guys on this very dangerous mission. I mean, I said this earlier, but it feels like Armageddon or like Con Air or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are snobs out there calling me an idiot for making that comparison. But I think it's true. It feels
absolutely.
like this, like, kind of heightened like action movie.
Yeah. And like there's such a variety to that tension too. Like there's scenes where it's just like them going across a road and they have to go a certain speed, or they have to speed up to get through it. And like the amount of tension in that scene is comparable to like other scenes that are more directly like tension filled, like them trying to maneuver around like a cliff edge, or I don't know, I don't want to say deck, but like a dilapidated wooden structure that is it. Like I kind of did like a oh Jesus moment in one part, and it's just like it's so well done. It's great.
I think it's, and again, not ragging on older movies, but I think it would be a great sort of introductory movie to people who are kind of hesitant about foreign films or older black and white movies, and, you know, might think that they're not as exciting as movies today. I think The Wages of Fear would be a great movie to kind of start them with, to prove them wrong and show them that, like, you know, stuff from the 50s also kicked ass.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because when you just said like foreign films, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is like a French movie. Like it's like the majority of like it's in like French, and I mean there's a little bit of English spoken and Spanish and Italian, but like talking it up in this recording, like I just completely spaced that it was a foreign film, which, I mean, like I watch tons of foreign films anyway, but it is incredibly well done. Yeah, and heartbreaking also.
Well, I'm glad that I sort of led you to it.
Yes. Without your knowledge, I was led by you to watch The Wages of Fear, and I cannot thank you enough for the complete inaction that you took in doing that. But I'm glad that you rated it at one point on Letterboxd so that I could come to it.
Hey man, I mean, that's the magic of Letterboxd. Like,
exactly.
Sometimes I'll just look at, you know, I'll randomly look at friends' pages and find movies to watch that way. So
absolutely.
It's like a very harmless form of stalking.
It is. And it is why it's one of my, if not my absolute favorite social media site, even though I don't know if you can technically call it social media, but yeah, I love Letterboxd. So
yeah, like instead of Facebook, where we're just kind of like scrolling through people's lives and getting bitter and like jealous and like conjuring up all these ugly feelings, like you can go on Letterboxd and say like, oh, they liked that movie, maybe I will too. Like,
exactly.
It's a more wholesome social media experience.
Oh, absolutely. And then you can get pissed off when they rate like Rebel Moon like 4 stars.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. But much like The Wages of Fear, it is its own minefield. Letterboxd is, but
well done.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, so that's all I've got for Potpourri here. So we're gonna close out the episode. That's it. Sam, thank you so much for joining me, and if you wouldn't mind telling people where they can find you online, and if you've got any reviews coming up or anything that's on your radar in terms of movies.
Yeah, you can find all of my reviews on, or all of my latest reviews on MidwestFilmJournal.com. You can find me on Letterboxd at Sam Movie Man. I have a review of Night Swim. I'm not really sure what's coming up next. I think Midwest Film Journal has a few themed series in the works, which I'm sure I'll contribute to. But yeah, just keep an eye on it. I'm sure I'll be on there eventually.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for joining me tonight. For the listeners, thank you for listening. And also, you can subscribe to the show and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Audible also. Links to all that in the show notes and everything. Tell your friends about Obsessive Viewer and help grow the podcast. Next week on the show, the plan is to review Mean Girls 2024 and ISS, which in my head I keep saying ISIS. So that's on the docket for next week. I'm going to start playing us out. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Obsessive Viewer and all across social media at Obsessive Viewer. Also check out the other shows, Anthology and Tower Junkies. And once again, if you feel like you're in the giving mood, check out Patreon, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Hundreds and hundreds of exclusive episodes there. Thank you once again, Sam, and thank you for listeners, and we'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive feed. For this and more exclusive content, join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. amazing. Jane Alexander gives such an incredible performance, and there's the scene that broke me, the scene that legitimately just broke me was the one involving Scotty getting a bath in the sink. I'm not going to give away what it is, but just when you see that scene and you realize what's happening and you realize what it means, and it is so beautifully done, but it is almost too painful to watch. It's too painful to watch because it feels just so genuine. It feels so like realistic. Like I said, nothing in this movie delves into any kind of melodrama. Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our reviews, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on all of our shows, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, plus plenty of written reviews, visit obsessiveviewer.com. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and help grow our community. If you want to support the show and help keep us going while getting early access to new episodes as well as a steady stream of exclusive content, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.